Well, hello and welcome to the Footy Interchange. Adam Papalia with you for the show this afternoon. And you might not be able to tell just yet, but I will confirm no Will Schofield today. He's headed off on a business trip, some sort of junket type thing that he's headed to over east, and he couldn't quite make the show today. Ironically, though, I think he's been stuck on the tarmac for about 2 hours. So that's ironic, isn't it? And sucked in to be him sitting there on the aeroplane waiting to fly off rather than being here, part of his commitment to this show. But Sco will be back next week, and we'll bring back the exchange next week. So make sure you send through your questions and get ready for that. But I'm really looking forward to getting right around the country today and talking to all of our special guests, all our reporters on the ground to talk the footy as we hit preliminary final week. And, of course, we've got the 4 teams remaining that have been there and done it before. And I really want to hear from people in the comments if you're watching this one along on YouTube, or you can hit me up on social media. You look at the stats around these 4 teams. So these 4 teams have featured in the most preliminary finals this century, and they battle it out again. Geelong have played in 13 prelims, Collingwood 12, Hawthorn 11 and Brisbane 10, the only teams to appear in double-digit prelims since 2000. And then of those 4 preliminary finalists, they've won 14 of the last 24 premierships. An incredible run. It does feel like the AFL, the stronger teams seem to get stronger and get better, while the teams that struggle seem to stay down for a little bit longer. But of those 4 teams remaining, this is the question I want to pose to you today on the Footy Interchange. Which team do you want to see win the premiership this year, particularly if you're a neutral? Which team do you want to see win the flag, given that these sides have all had a fair bit of success in recent times? And I include Hawthorn in that, given that they won 3 premierships only a decade ago. So which team do you want to see win the premiership, who you'd be barracking for? And the second part to that being, which team do you really not want to see win the premiership this year? So drop it in the comments. Would love to do a little bit of a poll with all of the listeners and viewers and find out who you think should win and who you're going to be supporting through the rest of this September campaign as we hit the preliminary finals. But let's not waste any time. Head across to Queensland and check in with Tom Rockliff there, of course, from Rockliff Finance. Tom, great to chat to you, mate, as always. Let's kick it off with the Suns. A little bit disappointing last week, weren't they? How do you sort of assess their season? Do you give them a pass, a tick? What's the reflection after they were bundled out by their crosstown rival?
Yeah, I think you have to give them a massive tick. Paps, obviously, they look tired towards the back end of the season, but overall, for the season as a whole, they've played finals for the first time. They've won a big final on the road in a hostile environment over there in Perth, and then they shaped up in the first quarter against the Lions before they flexed their muscles and just dropped away. But I think they'd be super looking back on reflection now, they'll be obviously disappointed, but super happy with the progress they've made. And I think they'll be hard to stop next year. They get Charlie Ballard back, who's really important to their back six and the way he structures up. If they can land potentially a big fish in that forward half to help King, we know they've got Ethan Reid and a few other guys coming on. In that, they're probably just one short at the moment. Jared Witts can't go around forever either, so they may have to look to replace a ruckman at some point. But they've got the balance right. They've got some attacking half-backs, and they've got the makings to be a really a strong chance to go deep into September in 2026.
Yeah, they don't feel like they're too far away. I mean, one more win and they finish in the top 4 and things potentially look a little more different. So you said there that they probably need a big fish in the forward line just to go in and help out. Is there someone you think that they should target specifically?
Oh, well, I mean, the one that springs off the page is Charlie Curnow, whether he wants to go. If he wants to go, you try and facilitate a trade there to get him there. You've seen the way the Lions started that game. When King had the mismatch, he was dominant in that front half. And then once Andrews went to him, shut him down, there was no real other aerial support there. So if they had the 2-prong attack down there, if it was a Curnow, they look like a different team. You don't allow Harris Andrews to come off and take that match up on King. And it stretches the best teams a little bit further. So he's probably the one that you look at. We know that Oscar Allen's potentially looking to go to the Brisbane Lions as well. Can you potentially swing him over and get him to the Suns or something like that? But they certainly need maybe a second option in that front half, just a big, key, strong forward.
The game on the weekend. So Brisbane playing in their traditional jumper, and the Suns playing in the guava strip on the weekend. Watching on the telly, a lot of people were complaining when we were chatting on radio with them that it was a bit of a jumper clash. It was a little bit hard to tell the difference between the two of them. What did you make of it? And should the guava jumper be shelved for next year? Could they come up with something a bit different?
Oh, I think it's a high-selling jumper, believe it or not. So I think that they'll continue to use it. But I mean, in a game like that, they probably should have wore the red or something completely different, so it was really evident on TV. I mean, that's where the money's made, the spectacle on TV. And if there's confusion around it, I think there was at one point a guy with the best vision in the competition, almost Hugh McCluggage, handballed straight to his opponent in the back half. And it's like, well, if he's getting confused with the jumpers, then maybe there is something that we need to look at there.
Yeah, it's quite ridiculous, isn't it? When you get to a semi-final at that time of the year and we have an issue like that bobbing up, surely there's a bit more foresight. Looking across the line, so the Suns are done for this year. The Brisbane Lions the week before were thinking, oh, they're battered, they're bruised, they've got some injuries. They're going to go out in straight sets. But, I mean, they came through with their finals experience, didn't they? And they were really strong again. Do we change our opinion and think that there's still a chance to take it all out?
Oh, I think it's impossible to write them off. I've said it all year. They're just so hard to get a read on. Every time you write them off, they come out and surprise. And you'd imagine they'll probably go down there. They'll start outsiders against Collingwood, but I think their best footy is still better than anyone's in the competition. So that they are going to be hard to stop. And it was the younger guys that really stood up, and it was the same in the grand final last year. It was the Zach Bailey, it was the Ashcroft brothers, it was these guys that grabbed the game. Loman kicks three. So I mean, they've got options all throughout the field. Their older guys stand up in big moments. Josh Dunkley flies under the radar, does an exceptional job week in, week out. So they've got the right balance and the right mix to be able to win it all. Whether they can string it together, we know that Lockie Neal's not going to be there for the finals campaign, but I think they match up reasonably well against Collingwood, and really looking forward to this contest.
Yeah, obviously played in a grand final a couple of seasons ago. How do you look at the matchups in the midfield, in particularly Nick Dacos? Is that a Dunkley? Is it a Berry? Which way do you see that one going?
Yeah, I think you look at what they did on Easter Thursday, where they let Nick Dacos run around by himself. I think he had 24 at half time, and it was Dacos 3 votes by how far, and Collingwood were dominant in that game. I don't think they'll allow that to happen. Again, it was Berry on that night that went to him and curbed his influence somewhat. I don't think you're going to completely shut him out of the game, but excuse me, I think it's more a Berry matchup than a Dunkley matchup. I think Dunkley does a role inside. We've seen how strong of a tackler he is, but Dacos has got the wheels on the outside that I don't think Dunkley would be able to go with him. So for me, it would be a Berry matchup on that front. There's two other important key matchups, I think, at both bookends of the ground, and that's Darcy Moore and Logan Morris. We've seen Morris kick 6 on him earlier in the year, and teams, I think, started to work out that if you can play through Darcy Moore and not allow him to drop off, play through his man, make him accountable, that's how you can beat Collingwood the other way. So Logan Morris got hold of him only 6 or 7 weeks ago, so I'd imagine that'll be the matchup for them. They won't want to allow him to go to a Gallop or an Oscar McInerney or Darcy Fort when he's there, because Darcy Moore will just peel off and intercept those marks. So I think the matchup for the Lions will try and manufacture Logan Morris to him. And then at the other end of the ground as well, Harris Andrews, I think he has to go to a Mason Cox. And then, as we know, he reads it a lot better than what Mason Cox does. So he'll take him out of the game and then also look to come across third up. We've seen when Brisbane got the matchups wrong through this finals campaign. I think it was Ryan Lester in that first quarter. Unfortunately, Jeremy Cameron got hold of him in that first quarter against the Cats. And then we've seen Darcy Gardner go to Ben King and get shown up a little bit in that first quarter. So Harris Andrews, I think, will go to Cox and then look to play off him from there. So they're the three key matchups that I'll be looking forward to going into the game. And if Brisbane can execute them and get them done, I think they win that game of footy.
Yeah, you feel like if Brisbane can get it done this year, with the adversity that they've had, the tougher draw that they've had, the injuries that they've got right now, it would almost be more impressive than last year, given everything that they've gone through. I mean, their forward line, they're relying on Logan Morris and Ty Gallop right now to kick a score for them as two young key forwards that are 20 years of age.
It's crazy to think that, 19, 20 years old, you're relying on them to potentially win you a premiership. We expect the key forwards to take until 23, 25 before they really blossom. And these two guys, we're expecting them to do it. And if they get it done, it'll be a super impressive performance. No hip with there either. So, I mean, for Brisbane, they've got nothing to lose. And I think they'll go down there full of confidence and get the job done.
Do you think the motivation is there to try and get those guys that didn't win it last year that premiership, Darcy Gardner and particularly Oscar McInerney, who was so unlucky last year and celebrated with his teammates so well, even though he missed out?
Yeah, I think so. I think particularly the older guys for the Lions. I spoke to them after their round 24 win against Hawthorn, and they said that the young guys just don't understand how hard it was and how tough AFL footy can be. Harris Andrews and these guys, when they got to the club, we were getting belted every week. So I think there's motivation levels there enough to go on, and the older guys certainly understand how hard it is to win grand finals, but there'll be a little bit of extra motivation to get those guys that you speak of, particularly Oscar McInerney, who was there all season and then goes down in the prelim and misses that grand final. So I think motivation levels will be very high for Brisbane to get the job done, and potentially the week after as well.
Brilliant stuff, Tom. Always great to chat some footy with you, mate. Thanks very much.
Great, Paps.
Tom Rockliff there. Rockliff Finance for all your finance needs. Always great to chat to him here on the Footy Interchange as we go from Queensland down to Victoria. And I'm very pleased to say that we have one of our favourites back involved again. He's had a little bit of paternity leave. His life's changed completely, I reckon, in the last couple of weeks. And he joins us right now from Fox Sports, from Fox Footy, from AFL Tonight. Drew Jones, welcome to you, mate. How are you going?
Hello, Paps. Yeah, just settling into dad life. But yeah, Max is healthy, happy. Already's consumed a lot of sport. Just been nice. And yeah, so back at work. So Izza's doing things solo at the moment during the day. So yeah, let's see how the transition goes. But it's a good time of year to be back at work.
It certainly is, into preliminary final week. My youngest son's name is Max as well. So you've picked a very good name there.
Well done.
How's the sleep going? Is your head spinning? Do you know where you are right now and what you're talking about? Because I found out, I remember when our first one, Archie, was born, I called a game of basketball literally like 3 days after he was born, got to the end of the game and could not remember what had actually transpired through those 4 quarters of basketball whatsoever. Like your brain just goes into a bit of a fog for a few weeks.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that. Yesterday was incredibly busy at work. I think I did 5 or 6 different interviews across a couple of different clubs. Did a live cross with the winds blowing at like 80 k's an hour at the MCG. So it was like a bit of a rude shock to come back and be sort of run off my feet from in a professional sense when you add in the fact that things are pretty hectic at home as well. So now Max woke up last night at about 2:30 and we got back to sleep at like 5 or 5:30. So I wouldn't say it wasn't one of his better nights last night, but I'm holding it together for now.
Well, great to have you back on the podcast, mate. Glad to hear that the family is all going well. Let's talk some footy. Can we start actually with Essendon and Zach Merritt? What's the latest there with the Bombers? It seems like a really uncomfortable situation now.
Yeah, well, it's almost gone nuclear now, hasn't it, from Zach Merritt, in terms of it's pretty hard for a club captain to force their way out of a footy club. The only way to really do it with 2 years to go on your contract is to make the breakup really ugly. And it seems like that's the position that we're now in. And there's a really delicate situation unfolding with the best and fairest, which he's likely going to win. Does he choose to attend? Does he boycott the event? How does both sides handle this? Him not going to the best and fairest, to me, would almost be the last straw. But the difficult thing for Essendon is that they don't want to show their hand too early, do they? Because they want to extract the maximum value in a trade. So clearly Hawthorn are interested, and that seems the most likely destination. If Zach gets his way, it's just really difficult for Essendon right now because they're trying to rebuild and keep at least a small core of senior players together. Zach Merritt, one of the most consistent midfielders in the competition. He wants a flag. The Bombers want to rebuild quickly and bounce, and Zach Merritt's a massive part of that. So it's sad that someone who's going to be probably a 6-time best and fairest at a football club is having to force his way out and burn a few bridges. But it does make things very interesting going into trade week, that's for sure.
It does. Before we talk about the games this weekend, just other trade news. Obviously, Melbourne and Christian Petrarca's name's been floated up again.
Not really a surprise that this has reared its head again. And Stephen King, I guess the hard thing for him right now is that he's trying to win a premiership with the Cats as an assistant coach, but he's got a really important couple of weeks in the lead up to the silly season in trying to secure the future of some of his players. So Adelaide has been thrown into the mix as a team that would be interested in recruiting Christian Petrarca, and Alex Neil-Bullen sounds like he's already been doing some recruiting to get his former premiership teammate to the Crows. And it would appear on paper that boosting the star power in that midfield is certainly an area that the Crows might be looking. And certainly there's a lot of logic to the move. They're in the premiership window, Melbourne trying to rebuild. Obviously, there's a large salary packet which they would have to cover. But Petrarca's preference has always been to stay in Victoria and play for a Carlton or a Collingwood, perhaps Hawthorn, and certainly that was a move that might have been mooted before the Zach Merritt situation started to unfold. So interesting one for Merritt. For Petrarca, if he does seek this move, and the Crows are the ones that are going the hardest, is he willing to move interstate to have a crack at another flag and to get a fresh start? So again, that's one we're going to be following very closely.
It will be, and that's really going to kick into gear once the season proper finishes with all the trade news and movement. But people in Melbourne, the city of Melbourne, must be just absolutely frothing at the fact that there is 2 prelims at the MCG. There'll be 100,000 at both, and then rolling into grand final week. I know the AFL will be rubbing their hands together as to the cash that might be coming in the door from having a sellout at the G. But what's the feeling like around the city with, big, strong Victorian teams involved again?
I think it's absolutely incredible. I can't think of a prelim final weekend quite like this. 2019, there was 173,000 fans across the 2 games. But for whatever reason, just the magnitude of these 2 matchups, you've got the last 2 premiers playing Saturday afternoon at the G, trying to cement a mini dynasty in the modern day in the Lions and the Pies. And then this amazing modern day rivalry, which we get to enjoy every year on Easter Monday. And there's such an intense feel between the 2 teams post the 2008 grand final, which has, I guess it's gone onto the back burner a little bit as both, mostly Hawthorn, but both clubs trying to re-establish themselves through the, post the three-peat from the Hawks. But now it's very much back in vogue, the Kennett curse. And the interesting one there, which I'll throw in now, the Kennett curse often gets talked about, the 11 straight wins that the Cats had after that 2008 grand final. The Hawks actually haven't lost to Geelong in a grand final or a knockout final since 1963. So when Jeff Kennett says the Hawks always win the really important ones, he means it, and it goes way, way back. So, there is just so much to get excited about. The appetite for finals football in Melbourne is massive. Realistically, there's going to be at least 190,000 people walk through the gates over that 2-day period at the MCG, and that will be the biggest preliminary final weekend in AFL history.
It's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. I think all footy fans are jealous, the ones that can't get there this weekend. 2 massive games. On the team news front, let's chat the Pies. It looks like they've got a couple of injury niggles that they've got heading into this one.
Yeah, well, the big question for them is what they do with Bobby Hill, and they've got to weigh up so much here. And I was chatting to a number of people today, especially those who are pretty well entrenched in terms of Collingwood and the nuance for their selection. So Jeremy Howe is going to come back this week. He's been getting through training pretty well for the last couple of weeks, did the hamstring in round 24. So most likely Will Parker will drop out of the starting 22 to allow Howe to come back into the back 7. But then they have to decide, do they keep Roan Steele in the team as sub? Do they move Parker to the 23rd man? Or do they look at Bobby Hill and bring him back into the 23? So, Norm Smith medalist, we know what he can produce on his day, has only played once since round 15. Ironically, that was against the Brisbane Lions as a sub. He certainly provided some spark on that day, but do they have the trust in the preparation that he's had while he's been away from the club? Do they have trust in his conditioning? And is it worth the risk to roll the dice in a preliminary final when you're trying to win a premiership? if Jeremy Howe comes in and hurts his hamstring again, and Bobby Hill's the sub, that puts their team structure out a little bit. Probably safer to have Will Parker as the option. But then bringing on Bobby Hill halfway through the third quarter when they need a spark in the forward half, that seems like the perfect guy to have as your sub. So there's some decisions to be made for Craig McRae,
who's played well in big games before too. Obviously, Bobby Hill with that Norm Smith medal. Hawthorn and Geelong, any news there around team selection?
Yeah, so from a Hawks perspective, the big decision they need to make is about Cal Shadir. So a couple of weeks removed from a hamstring strain, but a very minor one. Do they roll the dice on Cal, who has shown some really spectacular moments? He can change games, incredible leap, talent, forward craft is through the roof, exuberance of youth. I thought Mitch Lewis just looked a little bit off the pace against the Crows. It didn't hurt them in the end because they got so much production out of Jack Gunston and their medium and small forwards. And Lewis is a really important piece in terms of having a target down the line, which is important in finals. But Cal Shadir can fill that role, as can Marbiol Chol. The question is, do they trust his hamstring rolling the dice for Friday Night Football against Geelong? So that's the decision they need to make there. I thought Changwath Jaff struggled a little bit with the pace of the game when he came on as sub. Whether they have another option coming out of the VFL, that's a question for them to answer. There's some niggles there. Gunston was limited in training with a hamstring, but he's expected to play. Impey is a bit sore, and so is Ginnivan, but expect three of those to play. So they've just got to make a decision on Deer. And from a Cats point of view, I think all is pretty tip-top in terms of selection for them.
Yeah, more been off-field headlines around things going on at the Cats. Fantasy news-wise, Goat Fantasy, you've done a great job all season. What are we still focusing on at this? I gave up on my fantasy footy a long time ago because I crashed and burned and was out weeks ago.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say, thanks to everyone who's tuned in. We hit 50,000 downloads for the season. And so it was a great first year for Goat Fantasy from an AFL perspective. There's still Supercoach finals fantasy game going on if you're brave enough to go right the way through the season. But NFL fantasy is very much rolling at the moment, and the Supercoach version of NFL is something new to the platform. So we're going to be following that quite closely because it is fascinating the way that you make up your team. And, as we know, NFL is just such a unique sport. So stay tuned to Goat Fantasy because we'll have some content rolling out over the summer and spring, and we'll keep an eye on the trades and moves because that gives us an idea of who might be value from an AFL perspective going into next season.
Love your work, Drew. Great work, mate. Great to hear that the family's going really well, that you're back on deck, and enjoy those two massive prelims.
Thank you, Paps. Appreciate that. Max will be tuning in.
I'd like to hear it. Drew Jones there from Fox Footy, Fox Sports, AFL Tonight, as well as Goat Fantasy. Brilliant to have a chat to him on the Footy Interchange as we roll now to Western Australia. And, of course, before we get to Eliza Riley, Heyscape, our great sponsors and supporters on this podcast, they're just about to launch a new style of cabin in their Denmark location. It's a dual cabin complete with outdoor bars, a private sauna and e-bike. And for that reason, Heyscape is highlighting Denmark for a giveaway. So they've worked closely with the landowners who also own the dam and the Cannabis Botanical Distillery. They've come together with an epic prize. It includes 2 nights at the Denmark cabin, a 2-course meal for 2 at the dam, and a drinks pack as well. All the details are on the BackChat Instagram. So go and check that out and head there for all the details and entry requirements. Of course, WA owned, heyscape.com.au. If you're looking for a getaway, really unique, off-grid, sustainable cabin that you can find somewhere on a property. Awesome place to stay. Go and check them out, heyscape.com.au. As we head to Eliza Riley from Code Sports, she does a bit of work on the AFLW with 6PR as well. One of the best in the business when it comes to breaking news, particularly in Western Australia. Eliza, great to chat to you. And I guess the big chat being in WA, we had the announcement that Origin has returned.
Yeah, super exciting being at Optus Stadium yesterday and seeing all the big wigs flying in to celebrate the return of State of Origin, but they're calling it AFL Origin. Apparently it's some sort of new marketing lingo that we need to get up to date with. But the genesis of it is 14th of February. What better way to spend Valentine's Day than with 55,000 of your close mates at Optus Stadium watching the WA boys go head-to-head with Victoria. It's obviously going to be the first Origin game this century, and it renews the rivalry that WA and Victoria started all the way back in 1977. So Glenn Jakovich was at the announcement yesterday, obviously a proud 9-time WA representative, and he sort of spoke about his experiences representing the Sandgropers, and the one that stood out for me is he said that after his debut in 1990, Gary Ablett Sr. tried to swap jumpers with him, as was the tradition back then. And Glenn said, you know what? No, I actually want to keep my first Origin jumper. You can keep yours, Gary. And that sort of speaks, I think, to the pride representing state versus state.
I think it's brilliant. I'm really looking forward to that, and having it back next year as AFL Origin, not State of Origin. Thank you for correcting me as well, but I think it's a concept that people will get behind. I'd love to hear from people in the comments if they think it's going to work as a concept, and whether we can get it back to being an actual fully fledged competitive game. My initial thought is, I don't know what you think, Eliza, but it's probably going to fall somewhere between the exhibition game we saw with the Fremantle and the Indigenous All-Stars this year in terms of competitiveness, between that and a preseason game to round one, sort of somewhere in between there in terms of how hard the players go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the players have been very keen on this concept returning, and doesn't sound like they're going to take any backward steps based on how much they backed this concept returning. And Andrew Dillon, the CEO of the AFL, said one of the clinches for bringing this concept back was he sat next to Patrick Cripps, of course, a great WA product at the AFL Captains sort of get together a bit earlier this year. And Paddy Cripps was in his ear the whole time about how much he wanted to represent WA and play for his state. So I think we're going to see the best of the best players signing up, barring injury and anything like that. It sounds like the AFL, the clubs are super confident that we're going to see names putting their pride on the line, because the downfall of Origin last time was when clubs started getting involved in blocking their players from taking part.
Yeah, that's going to be the big thing. As long as everyone commits, I think people get behind it. And I think they'll sell it out. I think there'll be 60,000 people at Optus Stadium on Valentine's Day next year. Looking at the local clubs, Fremantle, after we last spoke, they've made a few list changes. They've announced some re-signings with a few players. Michael Frederick with the 3-year deal, Sharp with a couple of years, and Oscar McDonald as well. But what else are they looking at? Joe Bridie, I know, spoke last week about potentially making some moves and trying to get creative with what they do with their draft picks?
Yeah, certainly it feels like Fremantle could be in the market for a big name at the end of the season. We don't know who exactly yet. We know they have a bit of interest in Judd McVie over at the Demons, who was sort of waiting to see who would be named Melbourne's next coach before making a decision on his future. But he's, a really crafty defender who the Dockers could use in half back, which is a position they've obviously been exploited in this year, with a lot falling on Jordan Clark's shoulders. But I was looking at Fremantle sort of list changes and retirements the other day, and I think I counted 7 so far, which is a big number to shift out, including the trade requests of Will Brodie and Liam Reedy. And you think back to earlier this year when the Dockers were very much in the market for Chad Warner and Cozzy Pickett, and had sort of 1.2 million in the bank to pay up to get one of those stars, if not try and lure both. So it feels like Fremantle do still have a bit of cap space available to potentially go after a really big name if one does become available. And you pair that with Joe Bridie saying late last week that they'd be prepared to trade away their first round pick to bring in some established talent. It feels like the Dockers could be cooking something in the background.
Watch this space. We will wait and see. It feels like they're not too far away in terms of their player personnel. So if they could bring 1 or 2 more in, it might just take them to that next level. And just recapping the AFLW Derby on the weekend, I think that is some of the worst conditions I've seen for a game of footy. It's supposed to be spring. It was raining, but particularly the wind. I mean, it was 57 k's an hour and gusts up to 76. Didn't make for the greatest spectacle, but it was still a good contest.
Yeah, I think myself and you perhaps were very glad to be in the commentary box with our nice closed windows.
Yes.
The poor punters out in the grandstands would have been feeling the cyclonic conditions out there. But I think we both said at pre-game, as soon as we rocked up and saw the conditions, it definitely suited Fremantle. And I think in dry conditions, West Coast would have got them and would have got their first ever win in the Derby. But obviously that wasn't the case. The Dockers played the conditions a lot better than the Eagles, and they are such a tough contested clearance team. And it was a brutal contest. It was brutal conditions. It suited the likes of Ash Mack, Gabby Newton, Kiara Bowers in the midfield, and of course Ola Lally, the best on ground medalist, who said in her post match speech it felt like home, obviously being from Ireland and experiencing conditions like that on the regular back there. So I think certainly it was a good result for Fremantle, given the results they've experienced in the last 3 weeks, with some heavy losses in there. But we still don't really know where they sit in terms of the season pecking order. They're obviously not going to be one of the best teams because they got absolutely blown off the park by Brisbane and North Fremantle. But the jury's still out on whether they can push into that sort of mid-tier and try and nab one of the last 4 spots in the top 8.
Brilliant stuff, Eliza. Always great to chat. Thank you.
Thanks.
Eliza Riley there from Code Sports, does some work for 6PR on the AFLW as well. Gun reporter over here in the West. And as I mentioned, that Heyscape giveaway, go and check it out. Go to BackChat Instagram. You can see all the details there and the entry requirements. They've got that new cabin opening up down there in Denmark. So it'll be certainly something to check out, heyscape.com.au, the latest there out of Western Australia. As we roll straight into our injury update, Steve Gravina from Front Runner Physiotherapy is with us. Steve, terrific to chat to you as always, mate, as we roll into it, and it's getting to crunch time at the end of this season, and injury navigation is so crucial right now. Let's just start it off with Luke Bruce. I mean, that was just such a horrible thing to see from a veteran of the game who's been there, he's done it all before, who's kind of hoping that he might still be able to put his hand up for selection for the Hawks late. But that was a nasty, nasty knee injury, and unfortunately that's clearly season done and career done, given he was retiring.
Yeah, like a horrendous looking injury as well. You could see the slow motion. You really cringe at it, where that foot gets stuck under the opponent and the opponent collapses and really opens up the inside of that knee. And they call it typically the unhappy triad, where it usually blows apart the MCL first, which is your first line of defence, and then exposes your meniscus and then your ACL. So the likelihood all three have gone. I know they've confirmed the ACL. So. Yeah, I mean, if Luke had aspirations to keep playing, it'd mean a 12-month rehab process. But obviously, at the end of his career, this is it for him. So, yeah, a tragic way to end. We've seen it with a few guys. I remember Juddy had a similar situation where that was the last time he was on the footy field in that situation. So, yeah, hard out to Luke and the family and the footy club. But not the end they wanted.
No, not at all. It's just, such a nasty one for him and for Hawthorn as they try to plough on through this final series. They look at the injury news on their front with Jack Ginnivan and Jack Gunston and Cal Shadir, the names that they're sort of looking at with a couple of injury concerns.
Yeah, so Ginnivan obviously had some concerns going into the game, and the reports are they had that scanned and cleared, and despite having some tightness, was able to play and perform. They obviously shut him down when the game was on ice, which they were lucky to have that luxury. And by the sounds of it, he's recovered okay and did a little bit of training yesterday, so was cited there. I mean, he'll need to train fully this week. But the fact that he got through the game and there were no major concerns coming out of it is a really good sign. His injury risk is still high, given that there's an awareness there, and there may be what they call like a subclinical level injury, which doesn't get detected on a scan, but still leaves them at risk of high-end injuries. But they may look to modify his minutes and increase his rotations to help get him through. But again, with a prelim final all on the line, you've got to try to get your best players out there. And then from the other side with Jack Gunston, again, he was shut down early with some tightness, but again, I'm sure just precautionary by the sounds, and he was cited again yesterday doing a little bit. So would need to tick off the boxes of getting through a training session, but they'll give him to the last moment to prove fitness, given how red hot form he's been in.
At the Cats, Reece Stanley's pushing to try and get back from that hamstring.
Yeah, so his injury came out of the wash of that round 24 game, so missed their qualifying final. And the comment was that if he had a game to play last weekend, wouldn't have got up for it. So, yeah, it's a bit of a longer hammy than what you typically see, it'll be a 28-day return or 27 days with their schedule. But, being a veteran athlete, they take the precaution and would have nursed him through the first few weeks. He would have had to tick off his high-speed running and do a fair bit of training behind closed doors before, passing fit through full training this week to put himself up. They'll go into all of their calculated risks as to, how important he is for their team success. And if he's in that best 22 and he puts his best foot forward this week at training, they'll pick him.
Yeah, I think Chris Scott said if he's fit, if he's available, he'll be straight back into the side. Jeremy Howe coming back. He's missed a lot of footy over the back end of this season.
Yeah, this will be a really interesting decision. I mean, he's proven to be so critical to their backline structure all year. Obviously, apart from Darcy Moore's big game in that first final, but he's broken down. I think in the last 4 games he's played, he hasn't got to the end, so his durability is significantly under question. He would have needed to get a bit of work done over the past couple of weeks, and will need to train fully and really impress the team, impress the selectors. I'm not sure if he's the kind of player that you'd have as a sub, just the way that he plays and the importance of him down back. So, yeah, it'll be a big move. They'd need to obviously have a number of alternate plans if he did go down, if they were to pick him, and how that team can be restructured and who they can bring in as a sub. But, if they're looking at someone like a Bobby Hill as well, and you're bringing in Jeremy, yeah, it's a lot of underdone players. So, number one, you'll need to pass fit this week through all the return to train and return to play markers and milestones. But then it gets to the selection table, so don't envy those guys.
No. At Brisbane, and this is an interesting one. When I heard it on the weekend, I was really looking forward to having a chat to you on Tuesday just to explain to me what is going on. Because whenever someone says hyperbaric chamber, I'm picturing like some type of submarine type device that they go into, and like you lock the door and it's like you're trapped in there for days on end until you're allowed to be let out. Lachie Neale trying to leave no stone unturned in his attempt to be fit and available for a grand final if possible. Talk us through what actually is a hyperbaric chamber, because it gets rolled out every now and again, and how does it actually work?
Yeah, it does. It comes in and out of vogue, since the 90s. I remember being a kid in Melbourne and seeing the stories of Robert Harvey getting into there on a Monday morning after games to help recovery. So basically, it's a pressurised cabin, so it's like that little submarine that you're thinking of, where they can control the pressure and the barometric pressure of the air quality, and you're breathing in 100% oxygen at an altered pressure gradient, which basically has shown to enhance healing effects. So basically, better quality oxygen's coming in, and it can enhance tissue regeneration, clearance of byproducts and waste products that come with injuries, and help get rid of inflammation. So, it's certainly not a magic cure, but it's a marginal gain which can potentially assist in the process. It's not turning a high-grade injury into a low-grade injury, but, when the chips are down like this, you throw everything at it. There's been a few players that have used it over the past, couple of years with reasonable success. A couple of guys from Freo the past couple of years have gone down to the hyperbaric medical team at Fiona Stanley Hospital. But yeah, usually, it's seen in wound healing. It's to help in people that have had big infections or cancer patients, or used with like the deep sea divers. But there's a little bit of evidence around it helping with tissue healing. So, when the stakes are this high, players will pull out all the stops to get themselves right. He's still really up against it with the grade of injury that he had. But every little bit counts. And so if you can spend an hour or two a day in a hyperbaric chamber, that can go a little bit along the way to help him get back.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear about these things. And Lachie Neale himself said that, he wants to, he would not forgive himself later down the track if he didn't try absolutely everything to try to get himself right. So how many of these things actually exist? Like, where are they located? And as you said, 1 to 2 hours a day, like what's the optimum amount of time you actually have to spend in there?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting part. There's medical grade hyperbaric chamber therapy options, and there's commercial grade. And I've actually got a mate who works in the hyperbaric team at Fiona Stanley, and basically there's not a lot of evidence for the effect of the hyperbaric therapy if it doesn't reach a certain level of pressure. Most of the commercial grade ones that you'll see at a recovery centre may not have that level of pressure. So you just got to be really careful where you're going and who you're using it with, and if they're a reputable source. But if they're at the threshold where it's deemed to have a good medical effect, then 1 to 2 hours a day, and over the course of a couple of weeks, can have a really good short-term effect. But some people for having like long-standing medical issues will be using these, weekly or twice a week for months on end to try to get the longer-term benefits. Someone like Lockie, though, you got a couple of weeks, you throw it in, you try and do something every day in there, and you hope for the best.
Fascinating stuff. That's great insight, Steve. As always, you have all the information that we need. Appreciate it, mate. We'll chat again next week.
Thanks, guys. Cheers, mate.
Steve Gravina there from Frontrunner Physiotherapy in Osborne Park. The injury update here on the Footy Interchange. Let's head across to Adelaide and check in with Dom Cassisi, of course, former Power captain. And he gave you the correct tips the first 2 weeks of the finals. He said the Crows were going to lose their first final. He said the Crows were going to lose their second final. They're out in straight sets. Dom Cassisi, welcome to you. I know you're not going to, enjoy that too much, but did you actually go to the footy on the weekend?
I did, mate. I did. I got one of my very good friends is a massive Crow supporter. And he messaged me on the Thursday. He goes, I've upgraded the box to a 22-seater. Do you want to come? And I'm like, this is just meant to happen. So I went there. I was well behaved in the box. I just sat there quietly. But end of the game, mate, I thought it was at a Wimbledon final because I went out straight sets. And then the camera went to the box of the Crows, and I thought it was Andre Agassi with the bald head, but it was Nixie. So...
You're not missing. How many Port Adelaide supporters are just reveling in the fact that the Crows went out?
Oh, mate, because Port Adelaide supporters over here have copped it for the last 7 years from Crow supporters. Mind you, they haven't made the finals, so I'm not sure why they feel they're confident enough to be able to rip into us. But, bombing out in prelims and, pretenders, not contenders, and all that sort of stuff. So Port supporters are basically saying to Crow supporters now over here that they've relinquished all rights to have a crack at us after doing something that no one's done for 43 years. So there you go.
The rivalry is alive and well.
It's
in South
alive
Australia.
and well, bigger than better. Yeah.
Looking forward to those showdowns next year. To be good. But let's straighten up a touch. The Crows, the performance, obviously, the wash up from it. You've highlighted a few things on this show over the last couple of weeks, but where did you think it actually really sort of went wrong for them in that game against the Hawks?
Yeah, look, I think the finals highlighted they're probably one or two midfielders, like elite midfielders, short of really contending. They've obviously had a great year, but the beautiful thing about finals is that you do really find out where your holes are. If you finish sixth, if you finish 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. You never really know where the areas that you need to really improve. But when you finish on top of the ladder and then you go into finals, it really highlights what you need to do. And I think the first 2 minutes of the game highlighted their lack of polish in the midfield. Hawthorn won the first 8 clearances, I reckon. First 3 goals in a couple of minutes. So I think that's where they need to focus on it. And it's interesting to hear now that they're talking about Petrarca and maybe Merritt going after those guys. So they've obviously identified it as well.
Yeah, so midfield is something you think that they need to improve on. A lot of talk, obviously, about some of the veterans in the side and whether they go on again. What's your gut feel with Taylor Walker?
Oh, look, he's an all-timer for that club. Watching, so there's obviously always been a lot of debate. I don't know if you heard it much over there, but over here there's been a lot of debate around does the 3 tolls of Thilthorpe, Fogarty, Tex hold up? And I reckon it's fair to say that unequivocally in big games, it's not going to. Against the better teams, when they're coming out fast, their back line, I just don't think they can put enough pressure on. And so I think for the progression of the club, as hard as it sounds, I think it's probably best that he sort of wraps it up after a bit of a high. He's been part of that legacy of getting him from 15th to playing finals for the first time in many years. He's been an important part of it. But I think it's just the question comes now is it time for that group to progress without him to go to the next level? Even though he's done nothing wrong, is he going to be in the next flag? And I think the answer is probably no at this point in time.
Yeah, it's a big call to make, isn't it? When you finished off top of the ladder, you'd be thinking, oh, maybe next year if things go right, we could be about there. But you're obviously pretty strong on it there. You don't think the 3 talls work. So do they need another small in that mix to make it work? Or is it, as you said, another midfielder sort of rolling through?
Well, they've still got, another midfielder rolling through, but Dan Curtin, they're playing up on the wing, but he's one of those guys that could be wing 1 minute and then deep forward a second later. But when Tex is up there with the 3 talls, he's got to be kept up the ground because you can't have 4 talls. So I think it gives him I think he's a gun, Curtin, and I think his game can go to another level. I think Fogarty signed a 6-year deal, so his game could potentially go to another level as well, and get these guys getting used to each other. Because Tex, it's not his fault, right? But he demands the ball. He's an imposing figure, and you can tell they look for him every time. So, and the other part of it too is you'd hate someone like Tex to have to be playing SNFL. In for 3 weeks, go over rest SNFL for a couple, or so I think he deserves to go out in a high. And sometimes clubs making a hard call is doing the best thing by the player as well.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting few weeks for the Crows as they make those moves to try to go to that next level next year and go a bit further in the finals. Just before we finish up on Port Adelaide, Jimmy Bartell's had a tour at Alberton.
He has, yeah. It's come to light the last 24 hours. So obviously Chris Davies leaving's left that general manager of footy role open. I think that's the role that they're talking to him about, from what I understand. So interesting, like someone of his caliber. He's he was on the GWS board, so obviously he understands the management side of it quite well. His IP he'd have from Geelong in terms of what they've done there, and obviously culturally he'd be a great fit. So exciting for Port Adelaide if they can get someone like that from interstate, because no different to what it's like over there in Perth. It's hard to get interstaters to come and coach, and so keep an eye on that one, I reckon.
Watch this space. Dom Cassisi, as always, mate, great to have a chat.
Thank you. Cheers.
Keep enjoying it over there. He's just revelling in, sticking it up to all the Crow supporters over the last couple of years. Thank you, mate. Dom Cassisi there in South Australia. It's been a big show, been a busy show as well. Sco will be back next week here on the Footy Interchange. Don't forget, thanks to Heyscape, go and check out the BackChat Instagram if you want to find out the entry details to try and win that prize and that stay down there in Denmark. Even if you're not based in WA, if you win the prize, you just jump on a flight and come over, wouldn't you? And enjoy it. Good incentive to come over to the West and do just that. So make sure you check it out. Drop some comments in. We'll bring back the Footy Interchange Exchange next week, and we'll make it a bit of a longer episode so we can make sure that you can answer your questions when Scully's back. I'm not sure if he's actually left yet. He might still be sitting on the tarmac. I'm not sure. But we'll answer your questions next week and get into it. But also, as I asked you off the top of the show, which team do you really want to see win the premiership out of the 4 that are remaining, given that all of these teams have won premierships in recent times? We've got the grand finalists from the last 3 years, and then the premiers of the last 3 years, and of course Hawthorn, who did that three-peat only a decade ago now. So which team do you want to see win the premiership? And which team don't you want to see the premiership out of the 4 remaining? Would love to hear from you in the comments. We'll address that next week as we prepare for a big grand final edition of the Footy Interchange. Thanks.